In this example, we will take a raw data file and fit peaks to that raw data file. And then finally, from those peaks, we'll run auto-indexing programs and see if we can find a unit cell. So the data file that we want to read is this one right here, and it is in a GSES format. So let's start by starting CMPR, and it's important for the fitting to be using a recent version of CMPR. So let me just point out that the most recent version, as of the time I'm recording this, of the fitting program has over here on this page wavelength 1, wavelength 2, and the ratio of the two wavelengths. If you don't see that, then you're using an out-of-date version of CMPR, and you won't be able to do the fitting the way that I'll be doing in this example. As a matter of fact, it will not be able to do K-alpha 1, K-alpha 2 fitting. It won't be important for the low-angle peaks, but it will be important for the high-angle peaks. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is read that data set. So we go to the Read tab, and then we click on the file format, which in this case is GSES raw data, and then finally we move to the directory where we are going to find this file. And this doesn't look exactly right with the window this small, but okay, so we need to go to the desktop. Here's the desktop, and you'll see the file doesn't appear because its extension is GDA, and these are the extensions that it's expecting. Well, these are not requirements. We can change the extension, so if I'll type GDA and then return, now it'll find the file extension that we want. You can always change this if you want to see all the files to make the filter star.star. Okay, so if we read that, now if we go to the other window, we can see that file. So what we're going to do is we're going to step through the pattern and do peak fitting on pretty much all the peaks that we can see comfortably, and then we'll try running auto-indexing, at least on the peaks that we feel are the most important. So let's go back to fit, and because there's only one data set, it filled that in for us. Otherwise we would have to click on this menu and we'd have a set of choices. Okay, now we do not need to fill out the wavelengths unless we have K-alpha 1, K-alpha 2 radiation, which is what we do have in this case. So let's put in the wavelengths. Copper K-alpha 1 is 1.540, let's say 6 according to NIST, and 1.544 and the ratio is approximately 0.5. That's good enough for us. Now, we can do ourselves a favor by, well, let's start by, we'll open this menu here, set range to fit, and we'll drag this over to the side. So we can zoom in on a low angle portion of the pattern and see what we see. Well, going along here, this doesn't look like a diffraction peak. It looks like some sort of background. Seems to be some sort of peak in this area, so let's zoom in on that. And it looks like there's two peaks here. We might or might not want to use this smaller one for indexing. We certainly do want to use this bigger one. So let's start by saying set from zoom. So the zoom, that's the region that we want to use for fitting. And if we look over here, it tells us that this is the data range we've selected and that there are 313 points in that region. We're limited in this peak fitting to, I think, less than 1,000 points. So once we have peaks to fit, There's a number of ways of setting the peak position, but the easiest one is to move to the location where the peak is with the window active. So that's why I clicked on the top here. And just press P to add a peak. So now we've placed one peak there and another peak here. And now we're ready to start a fit. Now to start the fit, perhaps the first thing we'll do is to do a calculation without refining anything. So let's just we'll run the fit, but we're not going to calculate anything. And you'll see that this peak is probably not in exactly the right place. The intensities aren't too good, but they're not too far off either. So we could at this point start and the peak width is not too far off either, just what we started with. So we can start by refining a couple parameters. Now we want to go slow here and not refine too many. Now looking at this, I would say that probably the peak position is the most far off. So let's refine the peak positions of certainly the first peak. We can probably get away with doing the second peak as well. So we'll run GPLS, and that looks a lot better. Let's do the area as well. Significantly better. It didn't quite converge, but it's close enough. Now the other parameters we can refine are the full width, and we'll refine the background. We won't refine the eta. The eta parameter is determining whether it's Gaussian or Lorentzian or somewhere between the two. An eta of 0 is a Gaussian peak, an eta of 1 is a Lorentzian peak. So this is a pseudo-void with equal contributions. So we'll run GPLS, fit it, and didn't change very much from before because we happened to start with a good guess for the full width. Background didn't change much. So let's change the eta now. That's the last parameter. We could stick in low angle asymmetry into this, but to be honest, I don't think we need it. There really isn't a whole lot of signs for a low angle asymmetry. And it's converged, and those peaks are about as good as it's going to get. So the next thing we want to do is move forward, move on in this pattern, and the easiest way we can do that is clicking over here, forward 1.0, meaning 1.0 times this dimension. So if we click 1.0, this is running up to about 14 and a quarter or something like that. Actually 14.199, 14.2. So that will make the pattern start at 14.19, and there's nothing there to see. So let's go forward yet another, effectively one full screen, and we see the beginning of a peak. So now we'll go forward smaller amounts, and clearly we've got a peak there. That's the region we're working with, so we need to put a peak here. So let's make that window active. Press P for a peak. Got a peak there, and normally I probably would think twice before refining these parameters, but everything is so close that we can probably at this stage just go for broke, refine all the parameters, and didn't quite finish the fitting, but it did now. Okay, so that peak is fit. So let's go on for looking for more peaks. And there's our next one. Two peaks. Now we could change the region a little bit by zooming out a little bit. We can change these numbers. So if we want to get a little bit more of a region in here, we could make this 22 degrees. Get a little bit more, make this region a little bit larger. No requirement, but we could make this, let's say 19.5. Okay, now how many points is that? That's still only 300 odd points. So let's add two peaks. Peak there, and a peak there. Oops, I didn't get it quite in the right place, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and we'll refine the positions and not the areas of those two peaks. And now we'll refine the areas as well. And that looks pretty good. That's converged, and it looks like a good fit. Now, one thing you might notice is that the peak is not quite centered where that line is. Why is that? In this case, that's because we're using a k-alpha 1, k-alpha 2 peak, fitting both k-alpha 1 and k-alpha 2 intensity, and this peak is in the k-alpha 1 location. Alright, so let's keep moving forward. This is our 5th peak. We want to get at least 20 peaks. So, okay, let's center that a little bit better. 2 more peaks on our list. So, clicking on this, peak, and let's go ahead and run the fit. And pretty good fit, but we can go a little bit better. And that's about as good as it's going to get. Okay. At first, one thought maybe there was a little bit of a shoulder here, but you know what? That's probably the beginning of the k-alpha 2 beginning to peak out of this, if you'll excuse the expression. It certainly looks like a pretty good fit. Alright, so let's keep going. That's certainly a peak there. Is that a peak? I'm not sure, but certainly there's a peak there. And let's add that. I didn't want to zoom. Let's see. I think how do we do that? Let's see. Nope. I want to zoom out. How do I do that? Actually, I don't need to, since I've got a peak in the right position, and I've set my range. So if I run this, you'll see the fit. Now, one might be tempted to include a peak here. The reason that I'm tempted not to, well, we have still to finish refining, is that I'm not completely sure that that's a peak. Rather than putting a peak in that might not be real, I'd rather leave the peak out of the indexing. But it'll give me a warm, fuzzy feeling if when I do the fit, the indexing actually does put a peak here at whatever this is, 26.6 or so. Okay, so let's keep moving forward. It works better on a bigger screen. And here we've got 2 peaks. So, peak and peak. Let's go ahead and refine everything. Okay, and that looks like a good fit too. Alright, so let's see. Now we're up to 10 peaks, so we're about halfway done with this. There's a peak right there. So, peak, and refine it. And one more refinement cycle. There we go. So I'm happy with that. And here, actually let's go a little bit more, since it looks like there's another peak. There, we've got 3 peaks now here. Now one thing you'll notice is that this looks very sharp compared to what we've seen before. That could be a sign of, well, first of all, could there be an extra peak under here? I don't know. Probably not. This is probably k-alpha 1, k-alpha 2 splitting. But we'll find that out for sure when we try putting a peak here. Oops. Sorry, we don't want that in that box. We want it press P over here, put a peak there, we'll put a peak here, and we'll try refining all of them. And didn't quite fit all the way through. There we go. And you'll see it's done a great job of fitting this with just the K-alpha-1, K-alpha-2 splitting. Sure does look like this is a sharper peak than that. They're being fit with only one width, so this width and this width is probably off a little bit. So that may be a sign of a little bit of asymmetric peak broadening. Maybe there's some strain there's some anisotropic strain broadening, or maybe the crystallite sizes are different in different directions. But anyway, we're still doing fine with our fit, so let's keep going forward. Okay, and we're getting into some pretty weak peaks, but I certainly think that it's worth trying fitting this one. Boy, I'm really uncertain as to whether to try to fit that one or not. You know what? Let's try that one too. So we'll put a peak here and a peak here. However, if we have problems in the indexing, this would be the first one I would get rid of. Or maybe even there'd be some other ones I'd get rid of. So let's go ahead and run this. And well, it sure looks like it fit a peak reasonably nicely. You know, we could do ourselves a favor in the future by increasing the number of cycles, perhaps. And maybe it'll converge on the first try. Okay, so that looks reasonable. I don't love this fit, but it's certainly fitting pretty well. So let's go forward. And that certainly looks good. If we do that, we get 2 peaks, maybe 3 in. So that one looks a little narrow. Boy, I don't like including that one. So we'll just include these 2 bigger ones. Peak and peak. And we'll run this. And okay. No, oh, I'm not refining these. So let's refine that. Well, you know, now that I've done this fit, it sure looks like that's a peak too. So let's go ahead and we'll add that too. So if we click P to add a peak, now we've got a new one to add. Run it. And that's converged. So we'll include that one in. And again, that's one that if we have trouble, we may want to try removing. But it sure looks like a peak. And we have almost enough to run the auto-indexing, but having some more high-angle peaks would certainly not hurt. So let's keep going till we get up to about 60 degrees. So let's add a peak. And actually, you know what? Let's go a little further forward. Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll add that peak again. Peak and peak. And let's refine those. Okay. And that looks good. So let's go forward some more. That helps to be able to see what we're doing. 2 very weak peaks. It's hard to know whether to fit these or not, but why not? We can always take the peaks out later if we're not happy. So let's put a peak there. Let's put a peak here. And all right. Now you'll notice that the 45-degree peak is still included here. So either I don't think I want to refine it, but let's include it in the fit. We'll see if it actually shows a tail or not. Okay, Oh, I see. We have 2 peaks over here. We really don't want both of them. So let's take this one out. How we got that one there, I'm not quite sure. So we'll have to remember that peak number 22 is, I wonder if I can set that to 0. Just make it easier to, okay. And we'll use it, but it's the area 0, we won't refine it. And so we've converged the fit, we can take it out. Doesn't make any difference. Either way works. And it looks like a good fit, and certainly looks like it's fit that sort of convinces us there are peaks there. So let's go forward one more. A little bit more. And okay, so let's put a peak. Peak here. Peak there, because it certainly can't be k alpha 2, and a peak here. Not k alpha 2 with the second peak, the higher angle peak, being more intense than the lower angle peak. So let's try refining the positions to start with. Ooh, and it got lost. That's not so unusual. So let's undo that last cycle, and let's try being more careful in what we fit. So let's just start by doing the calculation with no peak, with nothing being refined. And we see, those intensities are pretty low. So let's refine the 2 intensities. Actually, we'll refine all 3 intensities before we refine anything else. Okay, so that at least puts the peaks in the right place. Looking at that, I'm almost tempted to see, maybe this is not a real peak. There's not a real peak there. So let's take the low angle one out for the moment and try running the fit without it. It clearly needs it. Clearly can't fit both intensities with just one. So let's put it back. But let's be careful about how we do the position refining. Well, this one we certainly can refine right away. And let's refine the higher angle one as well. And we probably want a slightly narrower width, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so that looks not so bad. Let's refine the width and the background. And we'll leave the eta, since that's probably one of the most sensitive things. That looks a little better. Let's refine the position of this guy. And you can see when we refined everything too quickly, the refinement got lost. But if we're more careful about letting a few things vary at a time, we find the minimum. And now we'll try eta, and now these peaks are almost completely Gaussian. Alright, we are getting near the end. We're at 50-something degrees, and we've got 30 peaks. That's not bad. So let's go forward, and that looks like a good peak. Let's go forward a little more, see if we can get through here. So let's put a peak in here, and we'll put one in here, and I think again we'll be a little careful. Start by refining the areas, fixing the peaks where we put them initially. Then we'll add the positions. Not bad. Refine the background and full width. Not bad. And eta. Ooh, eta went to 1. That's bizarre. Particularly after it was Gaussian last time. Well, it is what it is. I'm not sure why it would be Gaussian in one place and Lorentzian in the other, but conceivably even true. So let's keep going. Okay. Okay. We certainly don't have a lot of intensity here, but let's go ahead and we'll put these 2 peaks in. And, well, let's go for broke. We'll find the areas and we'll let the background, I'm not going to let eta go yet. Okay, seems to fit that. We can refine the positions now. Not so bad. See what happens with eta in these peaks. And eta is now 0 again, which makes me more comfortable. And it's not quite converging, but there's a hint of another peak here, but don't love these peaks. Again, might be a place to make a note that these are not particularly intense peaks, and it's not converging well. Alright, we're almost at the 60 degrees I said we wanted to go to, so let's go a little further forward. And okay, that's certainly a peak there. So peak, and let's see how that refines, and maybe we'll think about putting that one in. Okay, so find its area but not its position yet. Okay, refine that. Okay, so you know what, looking at that fit, sure does suggest there's a peak here. Let's include it. Again, we can always take peaks out when we do the indexing. So let's put a peak here. And this converged, and I forgot to turn off eta, and eta went back to nearly 1 again. Just for fun, let's see what the fit looks like. Got a chi-goodness of fit just a little bit over 1. Let's take, now that we'll see what we get with this required to be fully Gaussian. Just about the same goodness of fit, so that explains why we're getting such different results. The background, the tails are pretty much ambiguous, whether it's Gaussian versus Lorentzian. All we know is that we're fitting the peak. So at this point we fit 36 peaks up to 60 degrees. We could, if we want to, reset the zoom and convince ourselves that if we zoom in, that in this area here there isn't a whole lot. You can see that at 60 degrees there isn't a whole lot. There is a peak here at 70, and maybe this one too, but they're not very strong peaks. I think we've fit most of the pattern now, so this is good enough for auto indexing. Oh, see, I see that I forgot to refine the area on these two. We still have the fit range set, so we can go back and refine again and optimize these a little bit better. So okay, so we've fit all of our peaks, at least all the peaks that we're going to include, and now it's time to consider what we're going to do with them. So one thing we can do actually is we can close this window right here. Okay. Another thing we can do is take a look at the peaks. If we go here, we see that's this is the file that contains all the peaks that we've fit. Let's rename this as a start. So let's rename it to the name of the data set is BAGH09. So let's call this BAGH09 peaks. So that's renamed. Now it's renamed. And let's save this as well. So let's write this as a CMPR project, which contains both of these. And let's ask to prompt for a file name. And let's call this, let's see, do we want to put it there? I guess we could put it there. And we can call this BAGH09 indexing. And the suffix for CMPR projects is .cmpr. And I'd like to make that the default, but we'll have to, it's not at the moment. Okay, so now it's indexing.cmpr. So now that we have saved the file, this is a good point to take a break.